She believed he was nothing more than a poor, crippled beggar. Every day, she shared what little food she had with him. But one morning, everything changed. Who was this man? Why did he choose her? And what was the secret he had been hiding all this time? Sit back and discover the twists and emotions in this powerful and deeply moving tale. This is the story of Esther. A poor girl and the beggar no one respected. Esther was a young woman, just 24 years old. She made a living selling food from a small wooden stall beside a busy road in Lagos. Her shop was built from old timber and rusty metal sheets, resting under the shade of a large tree, where many people came to eat. Esther had very little. Her slippers were worn thin, and her dress was patched in places. Still, she wore a cheerful smile every day. Even when she was exhausted, she welcomed every customer warmly. "Good afternoon, sir." "You're welcome," she'd say with a kind voice. Each morning, long before sunrise, she was up, cooking pots of rice, beans, and yam porridge. Her hands moved quickly, but her heart was heavy with sorrow. Esther had no family left. She lost her parents when she was just a child. Now she lived alone in a tiny room near her stall. No electricity, no clean water, just her and her quiet hopes. One afternoon, as Esther cleaned her bench, her friend Mama Titi passed by and stopped. "Esther," Mama Titi said, "why are you always smiling when you're struggling like the rest of us?" Esther smiled once more and replied, "Because tears won't fill my cooking pot." Mama Titi chuckled and walked off. But her words lingered in Esther's heart. They were true. Esther had almost nothing. Yet she still offered food to others, even when they had no money to give. What she didn't know was that her world was about to shift in a way she never imagined. Each afternoon, something unusual occurred at her shop. A crippled beggar would slowly appear from the far corner of the street. He moved inch by inch, pushing an old, squeaky wheelchair with his own hands. The wheels groaned as they rolled over the gravel. Creak, creak, creak. People walking past would snicker or turn their heads. "See this dirty man again," a young boy scoffed. His legs were wrapped in dirty bandages. His shorts were torn at the knees. His face was darkened by dust, and his eyes looked weary from years of hardship. Some said he gave off a foul smell. Others whispered that he wasn't right in the head. But Esther never turned away. She called him Papa J. That scorching afternoon, as the sun blazed in the sky, Papa J rolled up to her shop once more. Esther looked at him with gentle eyes and said, "You're back again, Papa J. You missed your meal yesterday." Papa J lowered his gaze. His voice was barely a whisper. "I was too weak to move," he murmured. "I haven't had anything to eat in 2 days." Esther glanced at her table. Only one plate remained. A small serving of beans and yam. That was the meal she had saved for herself. She paused for a moment. Then, without saying a word, she lifted the plate and set it in front of him. "Here, eat," she said quietly. Papa J looked at the food, then up at her. "You're giving me your last plate again?" he asked softly. Esther nodded. "I can always cook more when I get home." His hands trembled as he reached for the spoon. His eyes glistened with emotion. But no tears fell. He simply lowered his head and began eating, slowly. People passing by stopped and stared. "Esther, why do you always feed that beggar?" a woman asked from the roadside. Esther looked up and smiled. "If I were the one in that wheelchair, wouldn't I hope someone would help me too?" Papa J came every day. Yet he never begged with his voice. He didn't shout at people. He never stretched out his hands. He didn't ask for food or for coins. He simply sat silently in his worn-out wheelchair, beside Esther's wooden stall. His head always lowered, his hands resting quietly on his lap. The wheelchair itself looked like it could collapse at any moment. One of the wheels leaned awkwardly to the side, while the world passed him by. Esther always made sure to bring him a warm plate of food. Sometimes, it was rice. Sometimes it was beans and yam. No matter what she served, Esther always handed it over with a bright smile. It was another hot afternoon. Esther had just finished serving jollof rice to 2 schoolboys, when she glanced up and noticed Papa J again, seated quietly in his usual spot. His legs were still wrapped in the same old bandages. His shirt had even more holes than before. Yet he sat there in silence, as always. Esther smiled to herself. She scooped a generous serving of hot jollof rice onto a plate, added 2 small pieces of meat, and walked over to him. "Papa J," she said softly, "your food is ready." Papa J slowly raised his head. His eyes looked weary. But when they met Esther's face, they softened. "You never forget me," he said. Esther knelt down and gently placed the plate on the small stool beside him. "Even if the whole world turns its back on you," she said warmly, "I won't." Just then, a sleek black car pulled up in front of her stall. The door opened slowly, and a man stepped out. He wore a crisp white shirt and well-fitted dark trousers. His shoes gleamed like they had just been shined. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his eyes deep and unreadable. Esther stood quickly and wiped her hands on her apron. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted politely. "Good afternoon," the man replied. But his gaze wasn't on her. He was staring at Papa J. He didn't blink. He just stood there, watching. Papa J continued eating. But Esther noticed something odd. He had stopped chewing. The man took a slow step forward, tilting his head slightly as if trying to recall a distant memory. Then he turned to Esther and said, "Please, 1 plate of jollof rice, with meat." Esther quickly dished the food and handed it over. As he accepted the plate, he glanced back at Papa J one more time. This time, his eyes showed something else. A flicker of doubt. He quietly got into the car, shut the door, and without saying a word, drove away. The next morning, Esther rose early as always. She swept the space in front of her food stall, and wiped down her wooden table. As the sun climbed into the sky, she kept glancing down the road. Any minute now, she whispered to herself, "Papa J will roll in." But the hours slipped by. No sound of creaking wheels. No sign of Papa J. By midday, her heart began to race. She stepped to the side of her stall, and looked both ways down the street. "Where could he be?" she muttered under her breath. She asked Mama Titi, the vegetable seller nearby, "Auntie, have you seen Papa J today?" Mama Titi laughed and waved dismissively. "That old man. Maybe he dragged himself to a different street. You know he doesn't have legs." But Esther didn't find it funny. She asked 2 boys selling sachet water, "Did you see the man in the wheelchair today?" They both shook their heads. She even approached the bike rider who always parked close by. "Sir, did you see Papa J this morning?" The man spat on the ground and shrugged. "Maybe he's tired of sitting in one place. Or maybe he's gone for good." A weight settled in Esther's chest. She sat down next to her pot of steaming rice, eyes locked on the empty space where Papa J always used to sit. She didn't look away from that spot all day. 2 more days went by. Still, no sign of him. Esther couldn't smile the way she used to. She still served her customers, but her eyes were clouded with worry. She barely ate. Even the familiar aroma of her jollof rice made her stomach turn. Her thoughts kept circling back to one thing. Did something terrible happen to Papa J? She spoke softly into the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. That night, Esther sat alone in her tiny room, just behind her food stall. She held the plate she had last served to Papa J, staring at it as though it held answers. Papa J never skips a day, she murmured. Not even when it rains. Not even when he's unwell. So why now? She stood, walked to her small window, and pushed it open. A cold breeze drifted in from the quiet, dark street. Her eyes began to fill with tears. It wasn't just worry anymore. It was fear. Something wasn't right. Something deep in her heart told her. This wasn't just about someone missing. Something had happened. Something serious. Something, possibly dangerous. On the fourth day, Esther was seated quietly at her stall. She was slicing onions and arranging her table, just like she did every morning. Smoke rose gently from the fire, as water boiled for the rice. Suddenly, a sleek black car pulled up in front of her stall. A tall man stepped out. He wore a bright red cap. His shoes gleamed, and his clothes looked like they cost more than everything in her shop. Esther had never seen him before. He didn't smile. He didn't say hello. He walked straight to her table, and handed her a brown envelope. Esther stared at it, puzzled. What is this? She asked, holding the envelope with both hands. The man said nothing more. He simply replied, "Read it. And don't tell anyone." Then the man turned around and walked back to the car. Before Esther could speak again, the car sped off down the road. She looked to the left. She looked to the right. No one was paying attention. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside, there was only a single white sheet of paper. She unfolded it slowly. There were just a few words written. Come to Greenhill Hotel by 4 p.m. Don't tell anyone. From a friend. Esther froze. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her hands were shaking now. Greenhill Hotel, she whispered. I've never even stepped inside a hotel before. She glanced at the paper again. Her heart thudded against her chest. Who could have sent this? What kind of friend? She looked down the road, the car had vanished. She stared at the letter once more, then held the envelope tightly to her chest. Looking up at the cloudy sky, she whispered, I have to go. At exactly 3:30 p.m., Esther stood in front of her tiny shop. She looked at the padlock in her hand, took a deep breath, and gently shut the wooden door. She turned the key twice. God, please go with me, she whispered under her breath. She stepped onto the road and waved down a passing tricycle. Greenhill Hotel, she told the driver. As the tricycle rattled through the crowded streets of Lagos, Esther held the brown envelope tightly in her lap. Her heart raced. She didn't know who had sent the message. She didn't know what was waiting at the hotel. But deep inside, she could feel it. This was no ordinary day. Minutes later, they arrived at the hotel gates. Esther looked up. The building towered above her, its windows sparkling like glass. The walls were spotless. The front entrance gleamed with polished metal. It all felt like a dream. 2 security guards stood at the entrance. One of them, wearing dark sunglasses, stepped forward. Good afternoon, madam, he said. The guard asked. Who are you here to see? Esther opened her mouth slowly. I got this letter, she said, showing him the paper. It says I should come here. My name is Esther. The guard took the paper and glanced at it, then smiled warmly. "Oh, Esther. Someone is expecting you inside," he said. "You may go in." Just then, a man dressed in a black suit emerged from the glass doors. He walked straight to Esther without saying a word. "Please, come with me," he said. And started leading her back inside. Esther's legs felt weak, but she kept moving forward. The man guided her down a long corridor, until they reached a tall, brown door. He turned to her and said, "Someone is waiting for you in there." Esther's heart pounded louder in her chest. She stared at the door, then looked up at the man. "Can I go in now?" she asked. He nodded gently. "Yes, just go inside. You're safe." Taking a deep breath, Esther pushed the door open. Her eyes immediately found the man seated in a wheelchair at the center of the room. She froze. Her mouth parted. Her hands trembled. "Papa J," she whispered, clutching her chest. But this man didn't look like the poor beggar who used to sit by her shop. His hair was neatly combed. His face was clean and fresh. He wore a crisp white shirt with gold buttons. A shiny wristwatch gleamed on his wrist. Though still in a wheelchair, it looked different, clean and polished. He didn't appear weak or tired. Instead, he seemed calm and commanding. A slow smile spread across his face. "Esther," he said softly. "Welcome." At first, Esther couldn't move. Her heart raced wildly in her chest. She stared at him again. "Papa J, is it really you?" she whispered. The man met her gaze steadily. "Yes, Esther. It's me." He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Please, have a seat," he said softly. Esther eased down slowly, still staring at him as if in a dream. "My name isn't Papa J," he said gently. Esther blinked in surprise. "It's not." He nodded. "My real name is Chief George. I am a billionaire." Esther folded her hands in her lap, her eyes wide with shock. "A billionaire," she breathed. Chief George nodded again. "Yes. I own many businesses. I've built houses, schools, and hospitals. I've earned a great deal of money over the years." Esther's confusion showed on her face. "But why did you pretend to be poor?" He smiled, but this time his eyes were serious. "I wanted to discover the true nature of people," he explained. "I grew tired of those who help only when they believe someone is watching. I wanted to find someone who gives simply because it's the right thing to do." Tears welled up in Esther's eyes. "You gave me food," he continued. "And you did it with joy. You never asked for anything in return. You never mocked me or turned away." He looked at her with kindness. "That is why you are here. Every year, I choose 10 people who show true kindness. I help them become millionaires because people like you can make a difference in the world." Esther was still in shock, her mind racing from everything Chief George had just revealed. He gave a small, gentle smile, then slowly placed both hands on the arms of his wheelchair. Esther leaned forward, her eyes fixed on him. Then, to her surprise, he stood up. Her eyes widened, her mouth fell open. You can walk?" she asked, stunned. Chief George nodded quietly. "Yes," he said softly. "I can walk." Esther leaned back, still staring at him as if she'd seen a ghost. "But why sit in a wheelchair all this time?" she asked. He met her gaze firmly and replied. "I wanted to see if anyone would still care for me. Even when I looked broken. I wanted to find out who truly had a good heart." Esther's lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I didn't help you because I wanted anything in return. I didn't know you were rich. I just did what felt right." Chief George smiled once more and stepped closer. That's exactly why I chose you, he said. Chief George paused for a moment, gazing at Esther with kind eyes. Then he spoke again. Esther, come with me. There's a place I want to show you. She looked up, surprised. A place? Yes, he smiled. I want to show you something. It's part of your reward. You have a good heart, and people like you deserve good things. Esther stood up slowly. Okay, she said, her voice calm but uncertain. Chief George turned and opened the door. Esther followed him. The hallway was silent. Two men in black suits were already waiting outside another door. They nodded respectfully to Chief George and then fell in behind them. Esther glanced around. Everything still felt like a dream. When they stepped outside, her mouth dropped open. 5 large black SUVs were lined up neatly in the parking lot. Their shiny surfaces reflecting everything around like mirrors. Big men in black suits stood beside each vehicle. Chief George walked straight to the first SUV. One of the men immediately opened the door for him. Esther stood frozen, stunned. Chief George looked back and smiled warmly. Come in, Esther. Taking a deep breath, she slowly climbed into the car. As soon as the door closed, the other cars followed behind. The convoy of 5 SUVs rolled out of the hotel gate, like a scene straight from a movie. Esther sat quietly, her heart pounding. Where was he taking her? What was he about to reveal? The cars moved slowly through the bustling city. Esther sat beside Chief George, gazing out the window. She saw busy people walking, shops wide open, and buses moving past, but her mind was full of questions. Where were they headed? After about 30 minutes, the cars turned onto a clean, quiet road. The buildings here looked new and elegant, glass walls gleaming, bright signboards, fresh paint everywhere. Then the cars stopped. Chief George opened his door and stepped out. A guard quickly opened Esther's door as well. Come, Chief George said with a smile. Then Esther's eyes widened and stopped dead. Right in front of her stood an enormous, stunning building. It wasn't just a shop, it was a multi-million-dollar luxury restaurant, the kind of place where only the wealthy dine. It stood alone, wide and tall, with glass windows stretching from floor to ceiling. The walls were smooth and white like marble. The doors had gleaming gold handles. Flowers decorated the entrance. Esther's mouth fell open. She had never seen anything like this in her life. But what shocked her the most was the signboard. It read, Esther's Place, Home of Sweet Meals. Esther took a step back, staring at the sign again, making sure her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. Is this real? She asked softly. Chief George nodded gently. Yes, it's yours. Mine? She whispered, barely believing it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a bunch of keys, stretching them toward Esther while pointing at the door. Go inside. Esther took the keys and walked slowly toward the door, her hands trembling. She opened it, and what she saw inside made her cover her mouth in awe. The floor gleamed like polished glass. The chairs were large and soft. The tables looked as if they were crafted from glass and gold. Above, the ceiling lights twinkled like stars. The air smelled fresh and clean. Everything was brand new and flawless. At the back was a spacious kitchen. Inside, she spotted gas cookers, spotless pots, deep freezers, refrigerators, and even uniforms neatly hung for the staff. She slowly turned to face Chief George, her eyes brimming with tears. You bought all this for me, she whispered. Chief George stepped beside her and said softly. Yes. You fed me with your little money when you had nothing. Now, I want to give you a place where kings and queens will come to dine. You will never suffer again. Esther dropped to her knees, her hands covering her face. She was crying, but these were tears of joy. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't need to say a thing, Chief George replied gently. Your kindness has already spoken for you. From that day on, Esther became the proud owner of a large food plaza in Lagos. This was nothing like her little roadside stall anymore. The floors sparkled under the bright lights. The walls glowed softly with elegant lighting. The chairs were plush and spotless. Soft music played in the background, bringing calm to everyone who entered. Esther no longer cooked or served food herself. Professional chefs wore crisp white coats and hats, skillfully managing the kitchen. Waiters dressed in smart uniforms smiled warmly as they served guests. Esther simply sat in her office upstairs, her name proudly displayed on the door, her photo hanging on the wall. Everyone respected her. But despite the wealth, comfort, and fame, she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot Papa J. And she never forgot how a simple act of kindness changed her life. One morning, her manager stepped into her office. "Madam," he said, "the food truck is ready." Esther rose and smiled. "Let's go." Outside the restaurant waited a big white van. On its side was painted the name, Esther's Food Love, feeding the hungry. Esther had started a charity. Every week, her food trucks roamed the city, bringing meals to those in need. They handed out free food to poor people gathered under bridges, near bus stops, and around busy markets. People lined up with grateful smiles. Some had no shoes. Some were children. Some were old men. Esther walked among them, handing each person a warm plate of food. "Eat well," she said softly. "You are not forgotten." One of her workers leaned close and whispered, "Madam, why do you do this?" Esther looked up slowly and touched her chest gently. "Kindness brought me here, so I must send kindness out again." The worker nodded quietly. As they all watched the people eat and smile, the sun shone gently on Esther's face. She looked up to the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Chief George. Thank you for seeing me." Then she turned, walked back to the van, and drove off to feed the next street. Her life had changed forever, but her heart stayed the same. This story teaches us one powerful lesson. Kindness is never wasted. You may not have much, but when you give from a pure heart, your reward will find you when you least expect it. What did this story teach you? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. I would really love to hear from you. And guess what? There's another very interesting story coming in just a few days. So be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on your notification bell, so you'll be the first to know when it drops. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. Someone out there might really need to hear it. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate your time and support. See you in the next story.